Hey guys, Chris here with the Dargon Gaming Squad. I am really excited. I am finally running Deadlands today, and any minute the group is going to arrive. So I have 3 of the players from my home group that I normally play 2nd edition D&D with. And then there's 3 people from the Absolute Tabletop Facebook community that I met. They're all local people that I met last year at AtCon that are also joining us. So we've got, to keep with the theme, since it's Deadlands and it's a Western themed game, it's Western meets horror with a little steampunk. But in keeping with that theme, I did kind of go with some themey stuff with the meal today too. I always bribe people to come out here by feeding them. So anyway, so I've got some chili going on the stove, well, in the crock pot, and I've got some cornbread all made up. Well, I have the batter made and I'm gonna bake it a little bit later. And then just for dessert, I just kept it really simple and made some cookies. I have little bandanas for napkins, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So, and then we have our poker chips for the fate chips. And luckily my husband's into poker, so we have actually real poker chips, so that's really cool. But yeah, just trying to set the mood. And then I live out here in the Toolies, and just right over that way out there's a window next to me is a view of a train trestle, and the train comes through pretty regularly, so hopefully that'll kind of add to the mood too. So hope to come back and kind of do a post-game talk to just kind of share my thoughts about how it went. And yeah, so stay tuned. Right now it's been a few days out. I've actually had a lot of problems getting this video made. I've had battery issues, I've had focusing issues, I've rambled because I'm tired. So anyway, hopefully this one will be the charm and we'll get it out to you. So I'm gonna actually do 2 different videos. This one is going to be more about my experiences, what I learned about myself, and some tips and things that I have for other noob GMs like me, or in this case a noob marshal. The other video will be more of a review of the game itself and how the mechanics and things went. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So the first thing that I want to talk about is learning styles. I think it's really important that you know your own learning style and what works for you, and make sure that that's what you do when you jump into a new game. So in my case, I learn by doing, and I am really feeling the results of not having ever played this game before. So far, when I've gotten into a new system for the first time, I've managed to play with somebody who has a lot of experience in that game. There's a video here on the channel of me talking to Sam DiMercurio from Chalice and Chains about Edge of the Empire, and I've since played that game, and you can see those videos over on his channel, and I am in love with that system now. But I got to play a few sessions, and then now I'm in a campaign of that game with Sam, and I'm just loving it. So I really feel in this instance I would have benefited so much from playing the game first, and I kind of knew that about myself. But the few times that this particular system popped up in any of the gaming groups I'm in, as far as interest posts and games to play, the timing was just all wrong. Like they were games on days of the week or times of day that I just could not play. And whether or not I would have gotten chosen for the game anyway is also, you know, completely up in the air. You just never know. So I do think, again, I'd say make sure that if you're learning a new system, that you do what you need to really feel comfortable with it, and make sure that fits with your learning style. So on that same note, I've realized something further as to how I want to approach this in the future. And it's something I've been kind of chasing around in my head. I've talked to a couple of the other GMs I know about it. I just haven't actually gone down that road. And I think, again, it would have really helped me with Deadlands. And that is just to sit down with a couple people and just play through a couple combat scenarios or a couple things that involve the mechanics. In this case, anything involving shooting and fighting would have been super helpful. Just kind of understanding how the wound systems work in this game and how the combat and stuff goes would have helped so much. And even doing a test battle with the big bad that we had at the end would have been helpful too. And I don't think it even matters that much if the person or people that I do that with necessarily know the game, as long as it's folks who can sit down and kind of help me figure out how it goes. And in this case, I was lucky to have my home group DM who just happened to kind of understand some of the crunch that went into the game. We are pretty certain that we did a lot of things not correctly and not according to the rules, but we did. He was able to get things moving again for me, so that really helped. So anyway, I think that's a really good approach. I know I've heard a lot about on podcasts that I listen to about, you know, creating characters and then running some scenarios, and I think that is just really smart. You know, sit down and kind of play those through. So that's a goal that I have going forward if I'm going to, you know, try to introduce a system to other people, and if I feel like I have to run it in order to have the game system get played, then I need to find some people who can help me kind of play with it and test it out first. And maybe even the same people that I'm going to do a one-shot with, or a few game sessions with. It can be them, it doesn't really matter. It's just as helpful to them as it is to me. It's like, let's just sit down with these pre-gens and give this a try. So the next thing that brings me to, the second thing that I feel that I learned for me, is that maybe modules aren't the best thing for me after all. All along I've been thinking, hey, modules are great because everything's there for you, and a lot of times they have, you know, paragraphs that you can read out loud that help you set the scene and kind of take care of some of those details for you, and I think that's great. But what I realized is, in comparing this game session to, say, my half shots that I ran, which you can also find on the channel, and again, I'll be sure to link everything that applies below in case you want to check any of that out. But I came up with that scenario myself. I made it a half shot on purpose to make it easy on myself. I didn't have a lot of details to chase down. I had one problem that they essentially had to resolve, and then I had a combat situation for them. So they got a little bit of both, and they had some time to kind of, you know, pick up on each other's things, but I also wasn't relying on a lot of role play from them as far as getting to know each other, and I think it just kind of helped things move along, and it went well. But also because I created it, and because I created the NPCs and I based them on people I knew, I had help from Nate putting that together, you know, that really helped me out. And so I really knew kind of backwards and forwards what I was trying to accomplish in the session. So with this Deadlands scenario, it was I just ran the one shot that's in the core book, and it was a neat little one shot. I actually thought the story was pretty cool. I just didn't do it justice, and you know, there were a lot of little details, there were a lot of NPCs, and then there were just things, you know, like pacing wise that I didn't do well, and I'll come to that again in a little bit. But the bottom line is, I think for me that maybe it would be better if I just created a scenario myself. Or in this case, this game, I've seen quite a few of what they call a one sheet. And those are just quick little scenarios on a piece of paper. Probably leaves a lot that you have to do as a marshal to figure out some of the details. But I think maybe even that might be good. Now, because this was a brand new system and everything about it was new to me, you know, I did want to run what was in the book, because I really don't know, you know, what kind of things might happen in this setting. So that it was good to have that as a taste. It's just, again, I didn't do a very good job of it, so I'm not feeling great about it. building on some of those ideas, I would say it's important to remember that you're telling a story. Don't be afraid to slow down and take your time and really set things up. So there was a little bit of a conflicting information, at least in my mind, probably more because I'm a newer GM. I don't have those, a lot of experience running games, that maybe I didn't pick up on this. But for instance, it kind of laid out the adventure in a way that said your players could get on the train anywhere between Boston and Denver. But it's not really important to know. Ask them where they boarded, but it doesn't really matter. Like, that felt really contradictory to me, and it made me feel like it's just not an important detail. But really, in not recognizing it for what it was, I missed out on a huge opportunity. And here's what I think it really was. And I bet any experienced GMs out there are already like thinking, oh, it's this. And that is that this was an opportunity to build the story and to really set it up and really give the PCs a chance to interact with what's going on this train. So this entire, almost the entire adventure takes place on the train. It all is wrapped up in the train, at least. And there were things that were supposed to go on. There were NPCs. There was one in particular that had a pattern that was supposed to get established, and I didn't get that across. So I could have done a better job of that if I'd thought about, okay, well, where are people getting on the train? And I could have started with that first person getting on the train and who's already there. Like, I would have had to put a little more thought. I knew who'd gotten on it. I knew of at least 2 NPCs that had gotten on the train in Boston. I knew that for sure, and they were key to the story. So I could have thrown anybody else in there at any time, and I could have said who else was on this train, right? And I didn't do that. And I could have given that player and or players opportunities to interact with those people. And then, I could have, stopped, kind of let things fast forward or whatever I needed to do to get the next group of people on. But I think, the way that it was that I absorbed that information and then proceeded to convey it because I didn't think it was important, left everybody thinking, oh, well, we're getting on in Denver and the story's starting when we leave Denver. Well, that wasn't, I don't think, the intention at all of the story. And so this particular story was also broken into 3 acts. And the idea was that the entire first act was supposed to be just the PCs getting to know each other, getting settled on the train, deciding where they're going to hang out, getting this pattern established with this kind of suspicious guy. Or at least, yeah. Anyway, the second act is supposed to be when the first of the action really occurs. And from the first act through the second act, it was supposed to remain daylight until the end of the second act. So night is falling as everything settles. Things have happened. Things have blown all to hell. And now things are settling down again and everybody's just chilling for the night. Act 3 picks up in the morning. So, accounting for the dark. And so, there was all kinds of time to play with that. And I missed out on it because I got hung up on this idea that it didn't really matter where they got on the train. And it didn't really matter where they were going. That was also in there. But of course, it does matter because the players have to have some motivation. Like, where are they going? What are they doing? What's their ultimate destination? They need to know that to include it in their role-playing. So anyway, don't let things get sped along. Go ahead and take your time and let the story spin itself out. Take however much time you need. In my nervousness, I really rushed things, and it just wasn't a good thing. So my next tip is, don't get hung up on the tiny, tiny details. So something that I realized later again, in the last couple days, thinking about how everything went and thinking about different comments that some of my players made. And one in particular did comment on this, like, you just got bogged down in these little details that you didn't need to worry about. And I knew that player was correct. And it led me to this kind of realization: if the core book mentions something, but then doesn't give you a mechanic for it, doesn't explain how to resolve it, doesn't build it into the story, it doesn't matter. Leave it out. Don't worry about it. It's not important. So I think there were a couple little details that are in the book that are things I didn't even pick up on, that you could, you know, if you were an experienced GM, that you could certainly build that in, or an experienced marshal. You could build, you know, more into the story, and you could certainly use that to create tension or create, you know, interesting situations throughout your game. But it's just not important in that first initial game, when you're first trying to figure out. You just don't need to worry about that stuff. Don't get hung up on what things cost. Don't get hung up on all the minutia of the setting, right? Just take the adventure however it's laid out at face value and go with it. Just run with it. With one-shots in particular, I would say that money almost never is going to be an issue. I'd be interested to hear from all of you more experienced folks out there. If any of you happen to catch this video, what are your thoughts as far as money and one-shots? But so far, I feel that more often than not, you know, I get into a one-shot and the GM says, hey, you know, you get to pick a couple magical items, and hey, you get this much money, and, you know, there's this thing and that thing. And more often than not, it never enters into the story. And in this particular story, the only time there was going to be anything to do with money was if there were two things. If the players chose to gamble, there could be money exchanges happening in that scene. You don't have to include the money. It could just be, you know, friendly. They're sitting down and they're playing, you know, like it just depends on how detailed you want to get. And then the only other mention of money was if they chose to dine on the train in the dining car. It was $2 per meal. That was the only thing. And because it's a one-shot, because we didn't have any plans like to turn this into a campaign or anything, there's no reason to worry about that money. Just like whatever, it's $2 a meal. So one thing is, because I had 3 players that I know from the Absolute Tabletop Facebook community, and I had 3 of the players from my home group. We had a little bit different goals potentially within those groups. So the folks that came from the Absolute Tabletop group were definitely just here for a one-shot. Maybe down the road they might want to play this again, but it's not like we definitely weren't going to be doing a campaign or really carrying anything on. I'm sure they don't even expect to run the same character again unless they, you know, really like them and want to reprise them for another adventure. But my home group, you know, we have this idea that, you know, we have this thing hanging over my head that I'm going to be running games while our regular GM starts prepping our next adventure. We're getting ready to wrap up our campaign here pretty soon, or so we think. We'll see how that goes. I'm sure it'll take way longer than we think it will. But because of that, there's this thought in our minds that if we like this game, we might want to try it again. And so they invested a lot more in their characters, but point being that they put a lot into those characters with the idea that they might play them later too. So, you know, we did have that, and so that created kind of a unique situation where some things may have been more important to some than others. And I didn't really communicate that to everybody. So probably I would say again, I would say, hey, you guys, you know, just know that for this game, most of this stuff isn't going to matter. And just deal with it. Just be like, this is cool. We're just going to deal with this. You can carry over your fate chips and all that, but like, just know that we're not even going to bother with money this trip. And so whatever you have right now is what you'll start the next session with if we play again. that's probably the easiest way to handle it. So the last thing that I want to talk about for this game in terms of things I learned about myself is GM screens. I have never been a big fan of the screens, and there's been a few times where I've thought, man, I should have a screen right now. But for this game, it's pretty darn crunchy, and it was a little clunky too. Now, I don't know if that clunkiness was more because I didn't know what I was doing and I was, you know, jumping around in the book, or if it was, or if it will prove to be that way going forward, if I hit a point where I kind of understand it. But I was, you know, I took some notes, wrote down some things I thought were going to be important to know during the game, and most of the things I wrote down were things I had to look at, but I didn't write down everything that I probably should have. That was a mistake. But this is the thing about screens, is a lot of times you'll have that information at your fingertips, the things that are important. So one thing about this, so I did hop onto Pinnacle Entertainment Group's website, and they do have a really cool customizable screen that seems really great. But looking through it, I noticed that they didn't have any sheets for this adventure. And I don't think there's any in my book that are set up to be used, you know, to be reprintable for the screen, and I don't think any came with the Kickstarter. So if anybody else out there did the Deadlands 20th Anniversary Kickstarter and has found what you would need for the GM screen for that, the adventure in there coming around the mountain, I would love to know about it. Let me know in the comments below. So the thing is that it just would have been so helpful. So it's something to really think about. Think about how are you going to access the things you need, and think about whether or not you have a good grasp of what you need. So, you know, having a way to organize that is really important. Now, something I will mention is don't forget that you have a table of contents. And the table of contents in this book is excellent. So that really helped. I was able to, if I could remember like where in the book it would be, I could figure out, you know, from the table of contents what page to go to, and that was really great. There was a little bit of struggling with that too, just because I just don't have the familiarity yet. Alright, so that's my tips. Know your learning style. Figure out if that means a module or a custom game of your own. Don't get hung up on the small stuff. Take your time and consider your tools. So that's it for today. If you have any tips for us, please feel free to share them in the comments below. And of course, if you like this video, give it the thumbs up for us so that we know which kind of videos to make more of. And we'd like to say thank you for all the new subscribers we've had lately. And if you aren't subscribed yet, why not hit that button right now so that you can catch all of our videos. And until next time, get out and get gaming. Bye, y'all.